Hi, I'm Jonah Comstock, Editor-in-Chief of Pharma Forum. I'm here with John Babich and Jack Hoppin. They've been on the show before, on Health Innovators before, as the co-founders of Ratio Therapeutics. And we are going to get an update. A lot has happened since I talked to you guys 7-8 months ago. You were in WeWork then. You're in this beautiful new office space now. You got another $20 million in funding. You've made some big hires. You announced a licensing agreement with Merck. You've had some data come out. So there's a lot we could talk about.
Yes, we have a lot to talk about. It's been a busy 8 months. People say time flies. I feel like progress is flying, but when you're super busy, I actually feel like time goes slow. So, which is good.
Now, as you mentioned, so we had several events since we last spoke, right? So obviously we moved into the Seaport, which is purpose-built for us. We have a discovery laboratory here for everything from early biology to radiochemistry, med chem and biochem in between those two. We've filed our second IND for the company, so it's been one a year for the last 2 years. We're on track. And that was our first, these are human studies for the identifying the dosimetry and safety of our FAP ligand, which is a partnership with Lantheus Holdings Company in Massachusetts. And as you mentioned, we finished our Series A since we last met. So
yeah, and as you also mentioned, in January we announced a partnership with Merck around a target called Granzyme B. We in-licensed an asset they put together, and for targeting Granzyme B for PET imaging. It enables the imaging of the active immune response. So we very, very exciting target in diagnostics that for us also in our therapeutic programs, we're excited to kind of ultimately do combination therapeutics with immuno-oncology solutions. And so the dream of can our drugs really go with radiation and debulking and in certain cases have complete responses in tumors. And then immuno-oncology efforts are really to see is, can you turn the immune system against the cancer? And this is a way to measure if that active attack of the tumor is happening. So really excited about that partnership as well. So a lot's been happening.
Yeah. So and to I think the other piece to our efforts there, having an imaging biomarker to identify whether or not that you've turned on T-cell activation, right, which is a very nice endpoint for trials in the IO space. It was also quite interesting to use it within our own remit, which is if we were to use our targeted radiotherapeutics, particularly our FAP therapeutic candidate, which we're in the process of developing, this could be used along with IO so that we might be able to turn, let's say, we'll call them cold, immunologically cold tumors into rather, let's say, hotter, or you warm them up a bit so that the immune checkpoint armamentarium can be used to actually expand the application. And so turning cold tumors hot for the IO application expands the use of that, also makes the radiopharmaceutical drug more useful, and it's sort of synergistic play to use radiation as a way to stimulate the immune system in combination with immune checkpoint. And this is ongoing now. It's been done in the external beam world. There's been a lot of work done at the group at Cornell, headed up by Dr. Fermente, using external beam radiation therapy. There's a lot of work out of the U.S. and France as well, using a combination of targeted radiotherapeutics and immune checkpoint inhibitors. So I think it's another aspect of using targeted radiotherapeutics to enhance overall the treatment of cancer. And again, we've come up with our own personal tagline, which I think is a really a mantra that we have at Ratio, which is we want to extend life with quality. And obviously IO has been shown to have some rather dramatic impacts on people's overall survival. Radiation therapies, systemic, have been, like Pluvicto, Lutathera, have shown really good stabilization of disease, again, without a very detrimental impact on the patient's quality of life. And so if we can add to that, we're really excited about the opportunities, not just on single agent therapeutics that we develop, but in the combination as well.
So that That brings me to kind of an interesting point here, which is having gone to ASCO this year and learning more and more about the oncology world. There are so many things going on right now that are new and that are exciting. But I don't, outside of my conversations with you guys, I don't hear as much about targeted radiotherapeutics. I mean, is it starting to gain traction more widely? Are people more familiar with what you're doing, as time goes on over the last 6 months? Or what is the kind of larger industry trend around that connects with your work look like right now?
Sure, great question. So targeted radiotherapy is not a novel idea. In 1951, radioactive iodine-131, was approved for treatment of thyroid cancer, still the standard of care, and still used also for hypothyroidisms. Basically, iodine goes to your thyroid and it will destroy your thyroid, and you do not need a thyroid to live. So it's very effective at removing your thyroid, and pharmaceutically. Curative. Yeah, curative in that case. And then in 20 years ago, a class of radiotherapeutics came out, Bexar and Zevalin, that were very effective in non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, anti-CD20 antibodies with yttrium on them, and
one with iodine.
One with iodine, one with yttrium, and very effective. They were quite controversial in their lack of adoption by the oncology community, which are beyond the scope of this conversation. But that really set the field back a bit. In 2013, Bayer got Xofigo approved for metastatic bone cancer. It's radium chloride. Radium chloride, akin to iodine, sort of naturally goes to the osteoblast at the interface of the tumor and the bones themselves. Has objective response, also very, very meaningful in those patients in terms of palliative care. It's a very painful disease, and it reduces pain quite a bit. But that's where the field stood. And then the good Dr. Babich was really a pioneer in PSMA, prostate-specific membrane antigen. So you've likely heard of a PSA score in prostate cancer. Prostate-specific antigen is a blood test. PSMA, that antigen is expressed on about 90% of prostate cancers. And that people have been using that in Europe in compassionate use capacities for quite some time, as well as another target, somatostatin, for neuroendocrine tumors. And along the way, John got a drug approved called Azedra for pheochromocytoma. Give me the pheochromocytoma, and that an orphan indication, but a very important drug. These were now targeted therapies where we're putting the radioactivity on a drug, and what kind of changed the field dramatically. I think if 10 years ago, you would really question if the supply side, the manufacturing. These are drugs that are manufactured and decay. And so you, unlike having a lot of therapeutics, which you can make in bulk, store, and ship.
Like making ice cream without, it's like making ice cream without the benefit of having freezers, right? You make it, and you have to ship it, and you have to use it, otherwise it goes away. And so there was a huge input from many corners of the world, and Bayer being one of them, and the second being Novartis stepping up, right? And so there was another drug referred to as Lutathera, which got approved for the use of neuroendocrine cancers. And Novartis stepped in and acquired that drug and the company that was developing that. And that put, now you have Bayer. We were in 2013, nobody was paying attention. Bayer stepped in and took over the radium chloride business from Algeta, and then Novartis steps in and takes over from AAA to acquire the Lutathera franchise, essentially. Right? They had a somatostatin franchise, and that extended their franchise. And then they make another bet, and they come in and they take over the asset known as Pluvicto, which was being run by Endocyte. And so now you've got two very large, formidable, historically successful non-radiopharmaceutical companies entering the space. And that changed the dynamic completely as to, not hearing about this space and it being very niche and, 500 people at a meeting, to showing up and having, airtime at ASCO for what the latest trials have been.
Yeah, and I think to close out the point about your question around awareness at ASCO and the rise of radiopharmaceuticals, the presence of such household names as Bayer and Novartis. And the first couple drugs are very important drugs, but are not blockbuster drugs economically. Pluvicto is the prostate cancer drug from Novartis, and is within a few quarters is already on pace to be a 10-figure drug. It's a very valuable drug, and so with that comes more infrastructure, more resources, and we've watched a lot of
more bets. Right?
More
venture capital money comes in, more institutional money. Yeah, so that's the state of affairs, guys.
The reason you don't see that much is right now only a couple % of cancer treatments are done with radioactivity, and you're going to see that go up.
Right. So that puts you guys in an interesting position, right? This isn't a situation where, oh no, the big guys are doing what we're doing, this is bad. This is a situation where, oh, this is bringing attention, this is building infrastructure.
Oh, we cheer for them every day because they're really forging the road. Those are two very good companies, and frankly, those are people that longer term you could view as collaborators, commercial partners, and that's how. Yeah. In fact, prior to this company, we developed a drug and sold it to Bayer, and the first studies we ran were in conjunction with them on that class of drugs. So those are great. The way the world works is those are great companies to partner with and work with.
So you gave me a little tour of the new facility earlier, and kind of one thing you mentioned does tie into what we were just talking about in terms of some of the particularities of this kind of drug, especially around the radioactive components and then what's needed to safely manufacture and test and develop those. But tell me a little bit about, generally, like, what has it meant to you to get this new space and have this purpose-built facility, and what's it allowed you to do?
Well, one of the fundamental things, being in a WeWork situation, a virtual situation, you're highly limited as to what you can do, right? Everything is remote controlled, and with a small C, it's not heavily controlled, but you're really sending all your work out. And to have a team dedicated, an internal team dedicated to the work, and actually have them do on-site, one of the things that's really critical and I think uniquely positive about a small company, right? There's a lot of downsides in terms of finances and bandwidth and everything else, but you are living your science every day. And so, this conference room that we're sitting in now, was filled this morning with all the senior team, some other junior team, talking about the science that happened the week before, a couple of days before, what we're going to do tomorrow. And that is, you're immersed in the science and having the ability to do everything from the early biochemical work, from the medicinal chemistry work, to look at this, and, we hand it through a hatch. The radiochemistry group labels compounds, it goes through another hatch. We start to do cell binding studies. We can do animal studies when the time's required. To have all that in house and see it in real time and actually go through the data, you have unbelievable competencies in data management, and just pulling this whole thing together makes this an extremely efficient machine, and that's where we're heading. But it's real time living the science, I think, that makes it most exciting for me. And the fact that we're with the team, virtual life is fine if you have to be somewhere, remotely and call in, but having the face-to-face contact and the conversations, let's say around the water cooler, they're very beneficial to sparking ideas. And I think this is really one of the exciting parts about it.
Yeah, and it's so hard to gear shift. We've used great external partners, and we were doing everything in external outsourced manner, and that can be great. There can be capabilities, bandwidth, also good ideas and collaborations, but it's very hard to gear shift. It's very hard to make a turn when everything's external. By the time you have to update and with a collaborator, everything it's just
scope.
So you're more nimble
by a lot,
even though your team is bigger than it was.
Yeah. Well, I like your attitude about bigger, but we are still small. We are 35 people, about 18 PhDs, and another 10 or so kind of functional clinical operations and G&A collaborators, consultants. Yeah, but we're still we're still in very, if we say we want to move the can, we can move the can. We don't need to have a meeting. So we're still in that stage of company.
You shared something else interesting with me on our way in about the art that you decorated the new office with, and its connection to cancer patients, and how you kind of keep the importance of the work close to home there. And I'd love to hear just a little bit about that, because I think it's a nice story and a nice reminder.
Yeah. So, and John should comment also. We someone in our team had the idea to reach out, and when you come into a new facility, it looks especially barren. the walls are down, and actually, I'm looking at the painting now from Suki Raphael and we were having a conversation with someone around this patient who unfortunately passed, but really got into painting after their diagnosis. And our teammate reached out to certain artist communities in the greater Boston area, and has anyone in your network been affected by cancer or a cancer survivor? And they put on an art. Many people responded, and they gave us their stories. We put up their artwork. It was here for opening. Then we had a specific opening for them, which was very moving.
A dozen painters.
Yeah, yeah, and and then we ended up, not the company, but we as a group, kind of
individually and collectively. Some people joined.
Yeah.
And so we turned around and bought all the art to leave it here.
Yeah. So
and
now part of it.
Yeah, and I think so. So one of the things, having been involved in developing drugs for, Jack mentioned the work that we did with PSMA early on. I had and Azedra for that matter. It was a very humbling but incredible experience to meet patients who your drug was helping. And there's plenty that they're not going to help. It's just a matter of the way cancer goes. But when you do finally interact with an individual who you've made, let's say, less suffering, extend their life, it is a motivation to come back to work every day, like renewed. Like you just like, well, here we go. And unfortunately, I mean, Jack's probably had this experience. I've had it. Not everyone in the company gets to meet those patients, right? It's probably true and the bigger the company, the more people aren't meeting those patients. We've had the intimacy with some of the investigators and the opportunity, because of the way we've interacted with the PIs, to actually meet some of these patients. And that one of the reasons why the art exhibit was so touching is that even though these aren't the patients that we were involved with, our whole team got to meet the patients, right, and hear their story and talk to them over a glass of wine and hors d'oeuvre and some. We spent hours. With the patients. We had them at the grand opening while our team was here. And then we just said, you know what, let's just bring them all back as a separate private event for us. And I think it's really important for the team to understand why they're coming to work. And if that doesn't motivate you, you should be doing something else, because there's plenty of things to do in the world, right? But if this really is something you want to do, and you want to relieve suffering and enhance the quality of life for your fellow man, I mean, it's pretty impactful for your psyche to say, hey, you're doing something good. Let's go and work hard. So lots of motivations out there. That certainly flips the switch for me.
Number one.
Yeah. So when we were sitting in that WeWork conference room in December, one thing I asked you guys about was, this economic climate and what it's like to be a small startup, and you kind of laughed it off. You said, what economic climate, right? And then you guys went and doubled your funding, raised a $20 million round. So you did talk a little bit about why the industry is interested in what you do, but what's been your experience with that in the interim? Was it hard to find those investors? Have you been able to be more picky?
I think we're really blessed with great shareholders.
Absolutely.
We, as was announced, the lead in the round was the Duquesne and Schusterman family offices, and these are sophisticated, large funds, effectively. We have yet to do a round with a classic institutional venture capitalist, which I think is what you'd read the most about. We meet with many of them, and it's possible in our next round we will have some of those, one or two of those groups join the cap table as shareholders. But yes, we were just able. There was a lot of enthusiasm based on what we had accomplished to date, and we had seeded the money, the company, and what the market and so on. So we were, lucky. Yeah, fortunate. it wasn't all luck, but you know,
No, but it was like lots of hard work, a clear story. I think we had already had a collaboration and an arrangement with Bayer and a household name, and everybody's got Bayer aspirin in their medicine cabinet, right? And then we had another room with Lantheus, which is a household name in our space. Hopefully, you have nothing from Lantheus in your cabinet at home. They just make radiopharmaceuticals. But and then we did a deal with Merck, right? Another household name in the pharma business. So I think we were doing what we said we were going to do, and the shareholder base is very intimate with what we do. Right? They see everything we're doing. We communicate clearly and often, and the progress was there. So I think that helped a lot. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the progress you guys have made in the science side in the last 6 months. I mean, what are some of the big wins, and directionally as you look forward, you know, what are you working on, what's coming up?
Sure. I think to that initial partnership with Bayer, that partnership's gone great, and we can't get into the details, but we're really successfully completing and delivering on that partnership. And it was always known to be a finite amount of time, and that's coming to an end. But just because you have a plan doesn't mean you'll succeed in it, and we succeeded, and that's great. With Lantheus, similarly, our task was to make a FAP diagnostic, and as John alluded to right at the beginning, we filed the IND for that. We're about done with our phase 1 imaging trial, and then frankly on that asset, they will take over the clinical development. That's really the core competency of that company. They're the market leaders really are the market leaders in PET radiopharmaceuticals right now. And the last was FAP, which we could talk about in more depth. The challenge when we think about what does it take, what's the name of the company? The name of the company is the ratio of the residence time of your drug in the tumor to the residence time in your off target. Typically the kidneys, could be a specific organ, but you need that ratio to be really, you want it 3.5, 4, 5 times. And that's going to give you the therapeutic index.
In conventional parlance, it's the therapeutic index, right? You want to be able to deliver more radiation, considerably more radiation to the tumor than the rest of the body, and that's really where we focus our energies.
Right, and that's been a difficulty with radiation since radiotherapy began, right?
Yeah. Having the whole premise of the company, we dove right in today, but in the last conversation, we talked a lot about tuning the bioavailability of these small molecules in the blood to drive tumor uptake. We continue to prove that to be the case. With FAP specifically, there was the drugs that came in and were imaged were washing out of the tumor too quickly. They were gone by 24 hours for therapeutic. Great for diagnostic. It's an exciting target for diagnoses, but not enough time to give you that ratio. And I think through a lot of hard work and through great collaborations, both with clinical collaborators in Germany and Austria, as well as just the whole team here, it was there wasn't anyone not involved in solving the riddle. I mean, obviously the medicinal chemistry, John and Steve DiMagno, the genius of kind of modifying the binding moiety at the forefront with different hypotheses, but we now have residence time, and that means we have a lead therapeutic program to go forward with next year, and that's what's driving our Series B money raise right now.
So in terms of kind of like timetables, thinking like phases or how soon you actually expect to see something in the market, where are you?
To market is as we know, is a longer road.
And a potentially moving target.
Yeah, we can state that concretely. It is an objective of the organization. And what's unique about this class of drug is patients will be treated with these drugs in real time and parallel under compassionate use, as the previous drugs we discussed, Pluvicto and Lutathera, were treating patients in Germany, Austria, Europe, mostly Europe, South Africa, India, a few countries that have these compassionate use cases where someone is past the standard of care and they can be treated experimentally with these drugs by a clinician under a clinician's guidance. So that will keep going. That really is greatly insightful. Our plan would be concretely is by the end of 2025 to have completed a phase 1 therapy trial. Also unique in this class of drug, you really get a lot out of a phase 1. It's not just a safety trial. You really you image the target, you see, you can kind of measure response. This is true of other drugs, but you get a lot of information. It's imaging your drug and then studying its efficacy is most quantitative. We have one of the most quantitative sports.
Yeah, and to that point, I think when you image, you can see those ratios, right? The things that we talked about in an image are actually can be quantified numerically. And so we know, and just as an example, where do you start dosing a patient in a phase 1? And there's a lot of discussion around that from a safety perspective, from an efficacy perspective, right? You don't want to start dosing a bunch of people so low that there is no benefit to them, right? Because ethically, you would like a trial, even though it's an experimental evaluation of a drug, you would like and hope that there's some benefit to the patient. Now, if you see that there's some benefit, but the toxicity is too much, then that drug will not advance. But if you see that there's an opportunity to advance that drug in those studies, then as ethically, we should be doing as much as we can for the patient who's participating in our research, right? So this is a two-way street, right? You have to give something to the patient at the same time. We want to develop this, from a commercial perspective. So that balance is very easily seen in the imaging that precedes what we do. Like we know that we're going to be able to start dosing at a certain level because we can calculate what the effect is of, say, the radiation is to normal tissues, what the potential benefit is to the shrinking the tumor. And this allows us to sort of, I would say not leapfrog, but in terms of conventional drugs, since we can see where it goes and calculate those things, we can start at a much more effective place and get more people on the right rung of the ladder to have some potential benefit for their cancer. And that, I think, is a huge opportunity for us as well, and the field.
So I think we're coming to the end of our time. I want to ask kind of for final thoughts from you guys, and also if there are companies that are still in the WeWorks of the world looking at you guys as a success story, wondering how they can have a couple quarters like you guys have had. Any advice?
Do your homework.
Work hard, build a good team.
I'm laughing at myself because this is a difficult space, and a lot of people have jumped in, and I think a lot of people are putting lots of good ideas on the table. We have a particular approach, and I think our approach right now is we're doing a lot of blocking and tackling to get our drugs moving forward, and I think we understand what we do fairly well in order to show the successes that we elaborated on. So, other people coming at things from a different perspective. They have different vectors. They're aligned with a particular isotope for whatever reason that might be. And so they're coming at things and trying to assemble their strategy around something quite different than ours. So I think from that perspective, it's hard to make sure you have the right model in trying to evaluate what you're doing. I think that's critical. And then I think having the right support and talent is key. I mean, you have nothing without the talent. Support financially and making sure you have a good understanding of the space. If you're coming in this space, if my life is limited really to radiopharmaceuticals, I wouldn't tell anyone else what to do outside of that. But I think there's a lot to be said for having the right people around you, and that's not just in the company, but at a board level, at an advisor level, at a mentor level, people that can guide you so you don't fool yourself about what you're doing.
Yeah, I'll only add that there are so many. There's actually such great value in pitching your ideas and organization to others. Listen. Listening is the key to life. You might not always like what you hear. In fact, you mostly won't. But people are smart who hear pitches all the time, and they give very good feedback and learn from that feedback. And don't be sold that your premise was perfect. It's probably not. When the world speaks, listen and be ready to change course and adjust your strategy.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me again, guys. This is really fun. It's
Great
nice
to see you.
To be able to follow up.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for coming. Come back at some point. Yeah, and judge if we're still on the right trajectory. But so far so good.